Hi, my name is Mark Engleman, the company Engleman Associates. And this video is about AI assisting significantly in building a company's functional requirements. So good ERP decisions depend on really understanding a company's business processes, today's problems, the vision for improvements, where the business is headed. So to do this well, it means that experienced people are interviewing executives on strategy, and process owners on details, and it takes a lot of time for both the consultant and the company members with traditional techniques. So what I'm about to show you breaks from all of that. Much of this presentation explains why this AI automation is real and defensible, and the smart use of AI to remove roughly 80% of the time this normally takes for our clients and ourselves. So claims like this invite healthy skepticism. We know that. So this presentation is meant to be a foundation for what we've built, how it works. And then whether you're a consultant partner or a prospective partner or a potential client, we can go deeper into how all this works as you like. So I'm going to switch now to the presentation on this topic. What we start with, before we drill down to the requirements, how the requirements are built with this new automation, is the big picture. Across the major services that we have offered for years at our company, from ERP strategy, selection, teaching buyers to control their implementation, and some other discrete services, we have extensive documented procedures, now totaling with the number you see here. And this number's gone up a lot lately because about 70% of it is AI instructions to keep the AI focused on what needs to be done with lots of validation mechanisms involved. 30 years, over 1,000 projects that are, the experience embedded in all of this. Second thing I wanted to mention that is across all the major services, from the ERP strategy to selection to implementation control, this process I'm going to show you is consistent for developing requirements, but the requirements built out are used a little differently. So, and they can be built upon, of course, if one client proceeds from one service to another. So now we can drill down into the how the requirements are built. The total body of requirements is around 2,000. And that's built out over the years, just what needed to be asked. And with the AI capabilities recently, that number's been augmented because we could go into the various business process areas, as you can see here, and just in a more mechanical way, study what could be better, what may be not properly represented as a requirement statement. So that's what exists in a highly organized format by business process category. Now I'm going to show you what we do to these requirements to better understand them for use with a client before the client project ever shows up. The first is tagging. And we have the full 2,000 library here, and each single one of those is tagged for what's called targeted tags. It's like what industries have a known correlation with the requirement. And we have 6 different tag types, industries being one, and there's about 50 tags entirely across those 6. The targeted tags only go so far in lining up what requirements should fit to a given client. So we have a concept called general tags. These are more broadly required things. Some of them are pretty much needed by all companies, and they are there largely to stimulate proper conversation during the implementation. They don't affect the selection or strategy much. And then there's some that don't have quite that ubiquitous suitability, but are close. And so the general tags fill in a lot to bring forward legitimate things to consider in a project. But then there's a subset of all the requirements that can't be confidently fired for inclusion with a client list by these first 2 tag types. So we have a client preference tag. And for the requirements that fit that category in a particular project, client project, the AI engine, looking at what we call the client intake information, will say, okay, which ones of these should we include in the client profile? And then we look at it, and then we look at it with the client for whatever's left over. And so we can make sure anything in this final group gets captured. So that's the tagging. The second thing I wanted to show you is a priority scoring. Every requirement is scored for how important it is. And there's 5 factors that affect the priority score. The first factor is like the native importance of the requirement overall. Then there's other factors, too much for this briefing here today. But depending on the score, the requirement gets dropped into one of these 6 categories, unmissable being the most important things. Administrative, just keep an eye on it during implementation. And I would like to say that the scores that are given generally for these requirements pretty much work out for the legitimate stratification of scores for the clients. It works well, although there's techniques to raise something up or lower it depending on the client situation. Okay, so that's how that's the background work. Now, when a client comes into the picture, we take an intake, or we produce an intake form. And it's basically basic information about the client and a number of questions that are qualitative, like what are your biggest problems? What are your biggest objectives relative to the process areas on the review? And those are tested, that intake is tested against the requirements, and the tagging strategy is developed by AI, checked by us, checked by our main point of contact with the client, and the requirements are produced. Then the qualitative items, the biggest problems to be solved, the biggest objectives to be met, those are looked at, and the requirements are scanned to say, are those covered in what the tags have done? And if not, we get involved, humans get involved to look it over and see, make judgment calls and see if something needs to be added, or maybe some of the other 2,000 that were not included on the list should be. And then the last major thing is independent research, where the AI function is instructed to go out to the world and say, okay, let's see what else we can find out about this company that could maybe change our thinking on some of the decisions made, or just items that were missed entirely. And that is what, with various interaction, validation by our team and the client's team, this is what delivers a requirements plan that the client says, you know what, now we get it. This is what is intended. We get it. And we see how this not only saved us like 80% of the time to develop it, but it's actually better than sitting there through painful meetings trying to grind this stuff out. And it's not a contained black box. A lot of interaction with people and outside world. Okay, so I want to tell you that the requirements process that I just went through, the background requirements and the screening for a particular client, whether it's strategy, selection, implementation, it's all the same, except how they're used. In the strategy, only about 5% are going to really matter for what should we do. Build upon what we have, the ERP, upgrade what we have, completely replace what we have. Selections, maybe 20% of the requirements developed will come into play as being influential from a functionality point of view. Implementation, everything's on the table. And the next thing is, where is all this put? This kind of is a different topic than building the requirements, but it's nice to say, well, how is this stuff leveraged in the various projects, especially implementation? It goes into what we call the vault, the client vault, controlled by the client, not 3,000 miles away with a third party. And the functional requirements go in here. Everything's organized by business process category and is eminently searchable by other topics and other stratification. Any prior discovery that our client has done goes in there. Any observations that we make in our work, building upon the functional requirements, goes in there, tagged by business process category. Best practices out in the world that should be in view during the implementation. Existing data status that needs to be migrated to the future, either to ERP or a permanent archive of some sort out of a prior ERP. And then the hundreds and hundreds of business process support tools, spreadsheets, paper forms, point applications for forecasting or something that ERP could replace, needs to be seen, all in the vault. So this was an important final step. So in summary, all of the major services from strategy to selection to implementation, the client functional requirement foundation is set once and then built upon all the way through here. And as you saw, There's a 2,000 point library. They're tagged, they're prioritized, and then they're checked against a client's priorities after the tagging match is done. The external research is done, and there's targeted client team validation all the way through so that the client team intended to say, we really have confidence in this as we make decisions on improving or replacing ERP. So thank you for watching this. And this is what we've built to support one important part of our overall ERP advisory work. And it's real. As we've said, roughly 70 to 80% of the work is carved out for ourselves and the client team with results that beat the prior manual approach. It's remarkable what carefully applied AI can do. And if you'd like to see more, a mechanical presentation of this, just let us know and we can do that. Thank you for your time. Take care.